Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. I don't know when I started to get jealous of the female character in my game. I just know that every time I logged in, I wished I could be her, just a little bit more. Tonight, that jealousy was a raw, throbbing thing. The screen in front of me was frozen on a login error, a contemptuous digital sneer. Connection failed, server unresponsive. "Come on, you piece of junk," I yelled, my voice a ragged tear in the stale air of my apartment. The sound was immediately swallowed by the piles of laundry and discarded takeout containers that served as my only roommates. A sour cocktail of old grease, unwashed fabric, and ozone from the overworked computer filled my lungs. I stood under the lonely hum of my desk lamp, the rest of the room receding into a dusty gloom. My fingers, slick with sweat and Cheeto dust, slammed against the enter key again, and again. Nothing. Eternal Realm was down. Again. My character, Alexis, stood poised on the login screen, a silver-haired sorceress draped in ethereal silks, her posture a study in effortless grace. She was trapped, and by extension, so was I. A hot wire of panic and rage coiled in my gut. I started hammering out an email to the support team. The clack of the keys and angry machine gun burst in the quiet. My first draft was just a string of curses. I deleted it, took a shaky breath, and started again. To whom it may concern. The server has been down for over an hour. This is unacceptable. I pay for this service. I expect this service to work. Fix it. Sincerely, Alex. As I typed, my eyes kept snagging on the profile picture of the support system's automated reply. It was a generic corporate avatar, a smiling woman with a headset. I'd seen it 100 times and never given it a second thought. But tonight, I found myself staring. The gentle curve of her jaw, the way her hair was neatly tucked behind her ear. Something in me, a small, quiet thing I usually kept locked away, stirred. God, what is wrong with you? Alex, I thought, shaking my head violently as if to dislodge the thought. It was just a stupid picture. It meant nothing. I clicked send and leaned back, the cheap pleather of my gaming chair groaning in protest. My body ached. I hadn't moved in hours, hadn't slept properly in days. The monitor's glow cast a sickly blue pallor on my face, illuminating the stubble on my cheeks and the dark circles under my eyes. I was a mess. But Alexis, she was perfect. I had spent weeks, no, months perfecting her. It had started innocently enough when I first created the character. The game prompted me, choose your gender. On a whim, a fleeting impulse I couldn't explain, I clicked female, just to try it. I told myself, just to see the different armor sets. That lie unraveled quickly. I found myself obsessing over her appearance in a way I never had with my old male avatars. I spent hours in the in-game salon, cycling through hairstyles, agonizing over the exact shade of silver for her hair. I blew a month's worth of in-game currency on a flowing celestial gown, not for its stats, but for the way the fabric seemed to shimmer when she moved. I even found myself adjusting the subtle slider for her lip color, a faint rose tint that made her digital smile seem warmer. My mouse drifted over to the character customization preview. I clicked it, and Alexis filled the screen. I could rotate her, zoom in. I admired the delicate embroidery on her sleeves, the way the light caught in her pale eyes. In this virtual world, I had crafted an ideal, a vision of grace and beauty that felt more real to me than the grimy reality of my own existence. The anger at the server outage began to curdle into something else, a hollow ache of loss, without the game. I wasn't the puppeteer behind this elegant sorceress. I was just Alex, a 28-year-old man in a dead-end data entry job, living in a shoebox apartment that smelled like failure. Alex was broad-shouldered and clumsy. Alex had calloused hands and a 5 o'clock shadow by noon. Another automated email popped up. We are experiencing technical difficulties and are working to resolve the issue. We appreciate your patience. Patience. I felt anything but. A fresh wave of fury surged through me. I started typing again, the words pouring out, sharper and more personal this time. Patience. I've been patient. Your game is the only thing that works in my life. And now you've taken that too. What am I supposed to do? Just sit here in this? I stopped, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, In this, what did that even mean? I was pointing a finger at my entire life. The anger was a shield, but behind it was a profound, terrifying dissatisfaction that I rarely allowed myself to look at directly. It was easier to be mad at a server than to be mad at myself. I looked from my hairy, thick-fingered hands on the keyboard to the slender, elegant digital hands of Alexis on the screen. The contrast was a physical blow. A knot formed in my throat. I didn't hate my life because a video game server was down. I hated my life because I wasn't her. The thought, so direct and unfiltered, sent a jolt through my system. It was insane. It was just a game. Wasn't it? My gaze drifted back to the support avatar, the smiling woman with the headset. I felt a bizarre pang of something akin to comfort just looking at her. It was a feeling I hadn't had all day, trapped in my own skin. "This is just a game," I whispered to the empty room, the sound thin and unconvincing, but the words felt like a lie. Every moment I spent logged in as Alexis, the world felt brighter, more manageable. People in Eternal Realm treated her with a kindness and admiration I never experienced as Alex. They called her she. They complimented her dress. They saw her as graceful and powerful. And when they did, for a little while, I felt it too. I slammed the laptop shut, the abrupt darkness making me feel even more exposed. The silence of the room pressed in, all the noise, the rage, the frantic clicking, it was all just a distraction. In the quiet, the real problem remained. I stood up and walked the few steps to the bathroom, flipping on the harsh fluorescent light. The man in the mirror was a stranger. His eyes were tired, his posture slumped with defeat. The scruff on his chin looked dirty, not rugged. His shoulders were a heavy yoke he couldn't shrug off. I saw the tension in his jaw, the deep-set weariness that no amount of sleep could fix. My stomach dropped. The revulsion was instant and overwhelming. I hated him. I hated this body, this face. I turned away from the mirror, my heart hammering against my ribs. My breathing was shallow, frantic. I stumbled back into the main room and pried open the laptop. The screen flickered to life, still showing the error message, but Alexis was there, waiting, serene, unflinching. She was the escape, she was the relief, and right now, the only thing separating me from her was a broken server. The jealousy I felt wasn't just for a character, it was for a possibility, a life I could step into, a skin that felt right, and I was locked out. The thought was unbearable. It felt like I couldn't breathe. A notification pinged 2 days later. A small triumphant chime in the oppressive silence of my apartment. The Eternal Realm servers are back online. We apologize for the inconvenience and have credited your account with a small token of our appreciation. My heart leaped with a force that surprised me. I dropped the greasy slice of pizza I was holding onto its cardboard coffin and scrambled for my desk, my hands shaking slightly as I typed in my password. The loading bar filled, and the world of Ethelgard materialized on screen. Vibrant and shimmering, I was in, I was back. The digital air of the Silverwood forest hummed with magic. Sunbeams filtered through the glowing leaves of ancient trees, illuminating my character, Alexis, exactly where I had left her. She stood on a mossy knoll, her silver hair stirring in a virtual breeze, her celestial gown flowing around her ankles. I took a deep, shuddering breath, a sense of relief so profound it felt like coming home. For a few minutes, I just made her walk, not run, not towards any quest or objective. I just used the arrow keys to guide her through the forest, watching the fluid, graceful animation, the way the dress swayed with each step, the delicate placement of her feet. It was a stark contrast to my own heavy, clumsy movements as I shifted in my chair. A message popped up in the chat window at the bottom of the screen. A player named Ironblade88 was nearby. Ironblade88, hey, you're back. Thought the server crash ate you. My fingers flew across the keyboard. As Alex, I would have responded with a grunt or a cynical joke, but I wasn't Alex right now. Alexis, I survived, just enjoying the peace before the next dragon attack. Ironblade88, good point. That's a great dress. Looks good on you. My breath hitched. The heat rose in my cheeks. A sudden surprising blush. He was talking to Alexis. Of course, to the pixels on the screen. But the compliment landed somewhere deep inside me, in the real world. The only comments I got on my appearance were from my mother, usually about needing a haircut. "God, you're an idiot," the Alex voice in my head jeered. "It's a dude named Ironblade hitting on a fake girl." But for the first time, I didn't want to listen to that voice. I didn't want to correct him. I didn't want to type, "Thanks, but I'm actually a guy." The thought felt like a betrayal. A betrayal of whom? I wasn't sure, but the feeling was there. "Alexis, thank you. I like it too." We chatted for a few more minutes about a new quest line before he had to log off. The interaction was trivial, meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but it left a warm glow in my chest that lingered long after his avatar had vanished. Someone called me she, and I hadn't flinched. I had liked it. That evening, the feeling followed me away from the computer. I was standing in my tiny kitchen, microwaving a sad-looking burrito, when the thought surfaced, unbidden and sharp. What would it feel like to wear something like that in real life, not a full-blown celestial gown? Obviously, but something soft, something that flowed. My eyes scanned my own clothes, thrown over the back of a chair. Stiff jeans, a faded, stretched-out black t-shirt. They felt less like clothes and more like armor, heavy, restrictive, functional. They were the uniform of Alex. On a sudden, bizarre impulse, I grabbed the thin, worn-out blanket from my couch. It was a cheap fleece throw, but it was the softest thing I owned. I went back to my desk, the burrito forgotten in the microwave. I was still logged into the game, Alexis standing patiently on the screen. I draped the blanket over my shoulders, letting it fall down my back. It was clumsy and awkward, nothing like her elegant robes, but the sensation of the soft fabric against the back of my neck and arms was new. "What are you doing?" the inner voice scoffed. "You look ridiculous." Maybe I did, but I didn't take it off. I sat there for an hour, playing the game with the fleece blanket draped around me, a secret little bridge between my world and hers. It was a pathetic imitation, but it made the experience feel more complete, more real. Later that night, the experience with Ironblade and the strange impulse with the blanket culminated in a moment of truth. I got up from my desk and walked into the bathroom, the same one where I'd had my crisis of identity 2 days before. I stood in front of the mirror, the harsh light just as unflattering as ever. There he was again, Alex, stubble darkening his jaw, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. The fleece blanket was still draped around his neck like a ludicrous cape. But this time, something was different. My disgust was still there. A low thrum of dissatisfaction, but it was mixed with a new, sharp clarity. I wasn't just looking at my reflection. I was looking at the problem. He was the problem. The disconnect was no longer just a vague feeling. It was a chasm. I looked from my own weary face in the mirror back to the computer screen in the other room, where Alexis was visible, bathed in the soft, magical glow of the virtual world. She was smiling, a gentle, serene expression I had chosen for her idle animation. And in that moment, the question that had been hovering at the edges of my consciousness finally broke through, clear and terrifyingly loud. What if I could be like her just for one day? What would that be like? The thought was an electric shock. It was followed instantly by a wave of guilt and shame. This was wrong. This was a perversion, a fantasy that had bled too far into reality. I was a man. Men didn't wish they could wear dresses and be called she. But even as my mind reeled with self-recrimination, my heart was pounding with a different emotion entirely. A wild, thrilling, terrifying excitement. The idea, once spoken in the privacy of my own mind, refused to be silenced. It was a spark in the dark, and I had a dreadful, wonderful feeling that it was about to catch fire. I quickly turned off the bathroom light, unable to look at Alex's face for a second longer. In the dark, it was easier to imagine. It was easier to be her. The box arrived on a Tuesday. It was plain, brown and anonymous, with a shipping label that listed a generic fulfillment center as the sender. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I carried it inside. I felt like a spy smuggling state secrets, not a guy who just ordered a few pieces of fabric off the internet. I placed the box on my bed, in the center of the rumpled comforter. For a full minute, I just stared at it. This was a line, a big, fat, definitive line, and I was about to cross it My hands were trembling not with excitement but with a profound, gut-wrenching terror. "You can still stop," the voice of Alex whispered in my head. "Just throw it out. Pretend it never came. No one will ever know." But I knew that was a lie. I would know. I would always know that I had flinched. With a ragged breath, I tore the packing tape off. The sound was deafeningly loud in the small room. Inside, nestled in crinkling tissue paper, were the items I had spent 3 nights agonizing over in the darkest corners of the internet. My browser in incognito mode, a pair of simple black satin panties, a matching camisole, a soft flowing silk nightgown in a deep shade of sapphire, and a small handheld mirror. I locked my bedroom door. I drew the blinds. Plunging the room into a dim, dusty twilight, I turned off the main overhead light, leaving only the small, warm glow of my bedside lamp. The shadows it cast were long and forgiving. My fingers, clumsy and thick, reached for the black satin first. The material was impossibly smooth, cool to the touch. It felt alien, like something from another world. I held the panties in my hand. They looked so small, so delicate. The contrast with my own rough, calloused hands was almost comical. Getting dressed in my own clothes was an unconscious act, a mindless routine. This was different. This was deliberate, ritualistic. I stripped off my jeans and boxers, my body feeling suddenly coarse and exposed in the soft light. My skin was pale, my legs covered in a light dusting of dark hair. My entire being felt aggressively, irredeemably masculine. I stepped into the satin panties. The process was a study in awkwardness. The fabric was unforgiving, designed for a body that was not my own. It felt too tight in some places, oddly loose in others. But once they were on, the sensation was shocking. It wasn't sexual. The surge of adrenaline that coursed through me had nothing to do with arousal. It was the thrill of transgression, the shocking intimacy of feeling this strange, soft fabric against my skin. It was the feeling of wearing a secret. My heart was racing. I was breathing in short, shallow gasps. I stood there for a moment, just feeling it. The satin was a whisper against my hips, a constant, subtle reminder of what I was doing. I put on the camisole next. The thin straps felt like spider silk on my broad shoulders. The fabric clung to my chest and stomach, highlighting shapes I usually tried to hide under baggy t-shirts. Then came the nightgown. The sapphire silk slithered out of the tissue paper like liquid moonlight. Holding it up, I could see the soft lamplight shine through it. It was beautiful. Taking a deep breath, I pulled it over my head. The sensation of the silk sliding over my skin was electric. It didn't just touch me. It flowed over me. It whispered past my shoulders, my chest, my arms. It pooled around my feet, cool and impossibly soft. My own rough skin, the hair on my arms and legs, felt like sandpaper against the fine material. I felt the gown shift and move with even the slightest twitch of a muscle. It was alive in a way my own clothes never were. I stood completely still, my eyes closed, just absorbing the feeling. The weight of it was negligible, but the presence of it was overwhelming. It was like being submerged in cool water for the first time. I felt the air in the room on my arms, a sensation my usual uniform of t-shirts had always blocked. Slowly, I sat down on the edge of the bed. As I did, something strange happened. My back straightened, unconsciously, without any deliberate thought. My posture shifted. I didn't slouch. I sat upright, my shoulders pulled back slightly, as if to accommodate the delicate straps of the camisole, to honor the drape of the silk. I picked up the small, handheld mirror. My hands were still shaking. I lifted it slowly, not to my face, but lower, angling it to see my body. I saw the fall of the sapphire silk over my knees, the way it clung and flowed. I saw my own hairy legs sticking out from the bottom, a jarring contradiction. But it was the strangest thing. Looking at the reflection, I didn't feel the usual spike of self-loathing. The anger I felt when looking at Alex in the bathroom mirror was gone. In its place was a profound, aching sense of incompleteness, like seeing a half-finished painting. The pieces were wrong. They didn't fit together, but for the first time, I could almost imagine what the final picture was supposed to look like. There was a moment of panic, a surge of shame so intense it made my stomach clench. This is sick. This is wrong. What are you doing? But then, as the wave of shame receded, another feeling washed in, quiet and clear. Peace. A deep, unnerving, and utterly blissful sense of peace. In these strange, ill-fitting clothes, in this secret performance for an audience of one. A lifetime of static noise in my head had just stopped. I wasn't Alex, the failing data entry clerk. I wasn't the angry, frustrated man who yelled at his computer. In the soft glow of the lamp, wrapped in silk, I wasn't anybody. I was just potential. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't hate the person in my skin. I just felt like they were finally on the verge of becoming. It started as a joke, a little game I played with myself, when I had to email the Eternal Realm support team about a persistent bug. I paused before typing my name. The usual signature, a blunt and impersonal Alex, felt wrong. It felt like putting on a scratchy wool sweater after being wrapped in silk. On impulse, my fingers typed out a different name. Sincerely, Alexis. I stared at the screen, a thrill running through me. It was such a small act of defiance, hidden away in a technical support email no one would ever really read. But it felt monumental. My cursor hovered over the send button. It felt like standing on a diving board, high above the water. I clicked it. The email vanished into the ether, carrying its tiny secret confession with it. Something shifted in me after that. The act of writing her name, of claiming it even in that small, anonymous way, gave it a new power. It was no longer just a character in a game. It was an identity, a persona I could step into, even away from the screen. I found myself changing how I wrote those emails. The Alex emails were clipped, angry, demanding. The Alexis emails, they were different, they were more expressive. Hello, I wrote a week later. Reporting a different issue. I was hoping you could look into a rendering problem in the Crystal Spire. It's making things a bit difficult for me during raids. And it's a shame because the zone is so beautiful otherwise. Thank you for your time. For me, I had started referring to myself as she, as her. In these private communications, the words felt strange and exhilarating on the screen. Each time I typed them, my heart did a little flip-flop, a mix of fear and validation. The split was becoming more defined. There was Alex, and there was Alexis. Alex was the person who dragged himself to work every morning. He sat in a gray cubicle under buzzing fluorescent lights, staring at spreadsheets until his eyes burned. Alex was the person who ate cold pizza for breakfast and ignored calls from his mother. Alex was a husk, a set of obligations and failures held together by inertia. He was anger, frustration, and a deep, gnawing loneliness. Alexis, on the other hand, was born in the quiet of my apartment after sunset. Alexis existed in the soft glow of the lamp, in the whisper of silk against skin. She was the one who spent hours researching, in incognito tabs. Late into the night, I devoured articles. I started with simple searches, psychology of cross-dressing. Why do I like wearing women's clothes? But my queries quickly grew more specific, more desperate. Gender dysphoria symptoms, hormone replacement therapy, transgender transition stories. Each article, each forum post from some anonymous stranger pouring their heart out, was a revelation. It was like finding a dictionary for a language I had been speaking my entire life without understanding a single word. The feeling of disconnect from the person in the mirror, the jealousy towards female characters, the profound sense of peace I felt when presenting as female. It wasn't just my own private brand of insanity. It had names. It had communities. Other people felt this way. Alexis was the one who started to practice. I bought a cheap tube of concealer and some tinted lip balm. I'd stand in front of my small handheld mirror, never the big one in the bathroom, and painstakingly try to cover the dark circles under my eyes. I'd apply the lip balm and press my lips together, feeling the slick, smooth texture. It was a tiny change, almost unnoticeable, but it made my face feel a little less like a stranger's. I started to practice how I moved. As Alex, I walked with a heavy, ground-eating stride. Alexis, I imagined, would be different. In the privacy of my locked room, I would walk from one wall to the other, trying to make my steps lighter, my hips swaying just a little. I'd stand in front of the mirror and consciously relax my shoulders, letting them drop from their usual tense, hunched position. The conflict between the two identities was a constant, churning storm in my mind. Alex was reality. Alex paid the bills. Alex was the person the world saw and expected. He was the lie I had to perform every single day. And the performance was exhausting. Every sir from a cashier, every man from a co-worker, felt like a small paper cut on my soul. Alexis was hope. She was fragile and uncertain, a creature of lamplight and whispered secrets, but she was also filled with a terrifying, thrilling curiosity. She represented a future that wasn't just an endless gray stretch of spreadsheets and loneliness. She was the possibility of me, the real me. The separation was so distinct that I began to think of them as two different people occupying the same body. When something went wrong at work, it was Alex's failure. When I felt a surge of rage stuck in traffic, it was Alex's anger. But when I logged into the game and someone complimented my character's outfit, that was a victory for Alexis. When I successfully applied a thin, even layer of concealer, that was Alexis's skill. When I read a story from another trans woman about her journey and felt a profound, tear-jerking kinship, that was Alexis's heart opening up. I was living a double life entirely inside my own head, and the strain was immense. The mask of Alex was growing heavier each day, and I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that I wouldn't be able to wear it for much longer. The decision was a fever that broke in the middle of the night. I was lying in bed, tangled in my sheets, the silent war between Alex and Alexis raging in my head. You can't do this. It's insane. Someone will see you. They'll laugh at you. They'll hurt you. But another voice, quieter but more insistent, whispered back, what if they don't? What if, for just one night, you could just be? That was the thought that did it. Not the idea of being glamorous or beautiful, but just the simple, profound idea of existing without the crushing weight of being Alex. I was going to go out. The planning took a week and had the logistical complexity of a military operation. I chose a Tuesday night, statistically the quietest. I picked a location 3 towns over, a small, dimly lit coffee shop I'd found online called The Daily Grind, chosen specifically because its website featured pictures of cozy armchairs and a distinct lack of bright overhead lighting. My goal was simple: get in, order a coffee, sit for 10 minutes, and get out. Success would be measured in not being noticed. The night of the operation, my apartment became a command center of anxiety. I laid the outfit out on my bed, a simple, dark blue maxi skirt that went down to my ankles, a loose-fitting black sweater, and a pair of simple black flats. No heels, nothing flashy. The goal was to be forgettable, a gray mouse of a woman. Getting ready was an agonizingly slow process. My hands shook so badly I could barely apply the concealer. I smudged it twice and had to start over, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled the sweater over my head, the soft knit a small comfort. Then came the skirt. The feeling of the fabric flowing around my legs was both terrifying and liberating. I walked a few steps in my bedroom. The gentle swish-swish of the material was the only sound. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of my TV screen, a tall, shadowy figure. The loose clothes hid my frame well enough, with my hair a little longer than usual, and my face pale with fear. I didn't immediately scream, "Man in a dress." I just looked, indeterminate and tired. That would have to be good enough. The 20-minute drive to the coffee shop was the longest of my life. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror felt like an accusation. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, my keys clutched in my fist like a weapon. The cool night air felt shocking on my bare ankles, a sensation I'd never experienced before. It was hyper-aware of everything: the sound of my flats on the pavement, the rustle of my skirt, the way I held my shoulders. I felt like I was wearing a flashing neon sign that said, "Look at the freak." I reached the door of the Daily Grind. The warm light spilled out onto the sidewalk. I could see a few people inside, reading or typing on laptops. No one was paying attention to the door, taking a breath so deep it felt like it might crack a rib. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. A little bell chimed overhead. A few heads looked up, glanced at me for a half-second, and then looked away. My heart stopped. They'd seen me, and they had immediately dismissed me. I was just another customer. The air inside smelled of roasted coffee and old books. The low hum of conversations and the clink of ceramic mugs was a comforting cocoon of sound. I walked to the counter on legs that felt like they were made of jelly. A young woman with pink hair and a nose ring smiled at me from behind the register. Her eyes were kind. "Hi, what can I get for you?" she asked. My throat was completely dry. My voice, when it came out, was a strangled whisper. A black coffee. Please." Oh God. My voice, I thought, panicked. It's too deep. She knows. She knows. But the barista just nodded, her smile never faltering. "You got it. That'll be $2.50. For here or to go?" "For here," I croaked. "All right," she said, taking my money. "We'll call you when it's ready." And that was it. The entire transaction. There was no pointing, no snickering, no whispered comments. There was nothing. I was invisible. It was the most beautiful feeling in the world. I found an empty armchair in a dark corner and sank into it, my body trembling with the release of a week's worth of tension. A few minutes later, the pink-haired barista called out, "Black coffee for a ma'am?" She had hesitated. For a horrifying second, I thought she was going to say sir, but she'd landed on ma'am. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. A single, polite throwaway word from a stranger, and it felt like my entire world had just tilted on its axis. A middle-aged man sitting nearby stood up to get his own drink, and as he passed my chair, he gave a small, polite smile. "Love that scarf," he said, nodding to the simple gray one I'd wrapped around my neck to hide my Adam's apple. I was so shocked I couldn't even respond. I just blinked at him as he walked away. He hadn't been flirting. He hadn't been mocking me. It was just a pleasantry, a normal, human interaction. I sat there, sipping the hot, bitter coffee, my hands shaking around the warm mug. The fear hadn't completely vanished, but it was being steadily replaced by a feeling so new and overwhelming I could barely process it. It was euphoria, a quiet, bubbling, incandescent joy. This whole time, I had thought the world was a jury, ready to condemn me, but tonight, the world hadn't even noticed me, and in that anonymity, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't in a costume. A lifetime of defense mechanisms I hadn't even known I'd built just crumbled away. The fortress of Alex had been breached, not by an attack, but by a simple act of acceptance. I wasn't a man in a dress. I was just a woman in a coffee shop. And in that moment, in the safety of that dimly lit corner, I realized I wasn't just playing a character anymore. I was finally, terrifyingly, wonderfully, starting to be myself. The coffee shop became a blueprint. The euphoria of that first night was a powerful, addictive drug, and it gave me the courage to push further. But I knew that concealer and quiet coffee shops were a temporary fix for a problem that was bone deep. The chasm between Alex and Alexis was widening, and living in that fractured state was becoming unsustainable. Alex was the anchor weighing me down, and I knew I had to cut the rope. Finding a therapist was the most terrifying phone call of my life. I found a clinic online that specialized in gender identity issues. I stared at the phone number for an entire day before my fingers, acting of their own accord, dialed it. I used my Alexis voice, a softer, higher pitch that I'd been practicing in private. It came out shaky and unconvincing. I'd like to make an appointment," I whispered into the receiver, "to talk about gender." The receptionist on the other end was calm, professional. She didn't laugh. She didn't question me. She just asked, "What is your preferred name and pronouns?" Tears welled in my eyes. It was the first time anyone had ever asked me that. "Alexis," I said, the name feeling solid and real in my mouth, and she, her. The therapist's office was a quiet sanctuary of soft lighting and comfortable chairs. It smelled faintly of lavender. My therapist was a woman named Dr. Miller, with a kind face and eyes that seemed to see right through the nervous, twitching mess that was Alex. In that first session, I told her everything. The story poured out of me, the game, the jealousy, the secret clothes, the coffee shop. I told her about the two names, the two lives warring inside me. When I finished, I sat there, trembling, convinced she was going to tell me I was crazy, that this was just some elaborate fantasy. Instead, she just nodded slowly, It sounds like you've been carrying a very heavy weight for a very long time. Alexis Dormo. Hearing her say my name, so calmly and naturally, broke something open inside me. I started to cry, not quiet tears, but huge, racking sobs that shook my entire body. It was a dam of grief, breaking grief for the boy who never felt right, grief for the man who tried so hard to be someone he wasn't, grief for all the lost years. That first therapy session was the beginning of my transition. It wasn't a single decision, but 1,000 small ones. It was a social transition first. The process of living as myself. I started going out as Alexis more often to the grocery store, the library, the park. Each outing was a small victory, a new piece of territory claimed from the empire of fear. But the biggest step was a medical one. After months of therapy and consultations, Dr. Miller referred me to an endocrinologist. I was starting hormone replacement therapy, HRT. I picked up the first prescription on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The small white paper bag from the pharmacy felt impossibly heavy. It contained 2 things, a testosterone blocker and little blue pills of estrogen. I went home and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the bottles. This wasn't a costume anymore. This wasn't a temporary escape. This was real. This would change my body. Forever. Am I killing Alex? The thought was sharp and painful. The past, as miserable as it was known territory. This was a step into a complete unknown. Was I destroying a part of myself? Or was I finally letting go of a ghost that had haunted me my whole life? With a trembling hand, I opened the bottles and took the first dose. The changes started subtly at first. Within a few weeks, I noticed my skin was getting softer. Running my hand over my arm, it felt smoother, less coarse. My sense of smell seemed to heighten, and foods tasted more intense. These were small things, but they were concrete proof that something was happening. Then came the emotional changes. Puberty, I learned, is a roller coaster whether you go through it at 14 or 28. My emotions, which I had spent a lifetime bottling up, were suddenly right at the surface. I cried at a commercial for phone services. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy watching a dog chase a ball in the park. My anger, Alex's constant companion, was replaced by a kind of tender vulnerability. It was overwhelming and confusing, but it also felt incredibly alive. I had spent my life in a gray emotional landscape, and suddenly the world was in vibrant, stunning color. I kept a journal, documenting every small change as if it were a miracle. Day 32 woke up and my face looks different, softer. Maybe the lines around my eyes seem less harsh. Cried for 10 minutes because I ran out of coffee. Day 47, my chest aches. A dull, constant ache right behind the nipples. Dr. Miller said this would happen. It's breast buds forming. I can't believe it. It feels both wonderful and terrifying. Day 68 looked in the bathroom mirror today, the big one. I didn't flinch. I still see Alex's ghost in the shape of my jaw, the width of my shoulders, but for the first time, I saw her, too. I saw Alexis peeking through. The process was slow, an exercise in excruciating patience. There were days of doubt and fear, days when I felt ugly and awkward, trapped between 2 worlds. I was losing the familiar landmarks of my old life, but the shores of my new one were still distant and hazy. The fear of losing my past was immense. But beneath the fear, for the first time in my life, I was hopeful. I was looking forward to the future. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of anticipation, wondering what new small change I might discover. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was becoming. And the person I was becoming was someone I was finally, tentatively, starting to love. The sun streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the morning light. It was a Saturday, nearly a year after I had first set foot in the daily grind. My room looked different now. It was clean. The piles of laundry were gone, replaced by clothes hung neatly in an open closet. On my desk, where a massive gaming monitor and keyboard once held dominion, there was now a simple laptop next to a lighted vanity mirror surrounded by a small, carefully curated collection of makeup brushes, palettes, and bottles. My morning routine was no longer a frantic scramble out the door. It was a quiet, deliberate ritual. I stood before my full-length mirror, the one that used to be my enemy. and looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was not a stranger, not anymore. Her hair, now long and cared for, fell past her shoulders in soft waves. Her skin was smooth. Her cheeks had a gentle roundness they hadn't possessed before. Her eyes, my eyes, looked clear and calm. There were still traces of the old architecture the width of my shoulders, the height that still made finding clothes a challenge, but they were just that, traces. They were part of my history, not my definition. I wasn't a man in a dress. I wasn't a performance. I was just me, Alexis. I picked out my outfit for the day, a simple floral sundress and a light cardigan. There was no anxiety, no frantic heartbeat. The act of dressing was no longer a transgression. It was simply an expression. The fabric felt comfortable against my skin, familiar and right. The dress wasn't a costume I was putting on to become someone else. It was just a piece of clothing I wore because it was a beautiful day, and I felt like wearing a dress. It was that simple. As I sat at my desk to put on a little makeup, my gaze fell upon my laptop. My fingers moved automatically. Clicking on the icon for Eternal Realm, the login screen appeared, the same one that had once been my only window to this world. My character, the silver-haired sorceress, stood there, as graceful and ethereal as ever. I looked at her for a long time. She had been my lifeline, the first iteration of Alexis. She was the vessel that had carried me across a vast, terrifying ocean of confusion and self-hatred. When I couldn't be myself in the real world, I could be her. She was my rehearsal, my shield. But I didn't need a shield anymore. My life wasn't happening on a server anymore. It was happening here, in this sunlit room. It was in the taste of coffee on my tongue, the feeling of a soft breeze through an open window, the quiet confidence I felt in my own skin. With a strange mix of gratitude and finality, I moved my cursor over the game's icon. I right-clicked, and a small menu appeared. My finger hovered over the word delete. There was a pang of sadness, like saying goodbye to an old friend. But it wasn't a painful goodbye. It was a necessary one. I didn't need her to be me anymore. I clicked. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to permanently delete Eternal Realm? A small, genuine smile touched my lips. Yes, I whispered to the empty room. I'm sure. The icon vanished. Just like that. The portal was closed. I turned back to the mirror, looking at my own reflection. I thought about the first line of the story I had started to write in my journal, the story of how this all began. I don't know when I started to get jealous of the female character in my game. I understood now. The jealousy wasn't about her magic or her adventures. It was jealousy of her authenticity. In her world, she simply was. There was no conflict, no pretense. She was a sorceress, and the world accepted her as such. The cross-dressing, the secret experiments, they had been a bridge, a way for me to get from one side of my life to the other. But I had crossed it now. I was standing on the other shore, and I had no intention of going back. I didn't need the bridge anymore. The mirror in front of me no longer felt like a judgment or a lie. It was just a piece of glass reflecting a person who is still a work in progress, a person with a complicated past and an uncertain future. But for the first time, it was reflecting someone whole. It was reflecting me, Alexis, and I was finally, truly, home.